Joining us is Fox News contributor Karl Rove. Welcome, Mr. Rove. Do Americans like divided government, or do parties just not meet expectations and therefore the party in power doesn't tend to stay in power?
I think the answer to that is yes, both. Take a look at the recent history. 1994, the Republicans, for the first time in 40-some-odd years, take control of the U.S. House of Representatives. They hold it until 2006, the second midterm election of President George W. Bush. Then the Democrats control until 2010. In the aftermath of Obamacare, the Democrats lose the House. Republicans hold it until 2018. First midterm election of President Trump, and then the Democrats hold it until 2022, the midterm election under Joe Biden. You know, you had a master class there from Speaker McCarthy, and he's right. The presidential impact on the midterm election is enormous. Only two midterm elections in recent history has the party holding the White House gained seats in the House in a midterm election. One of them was 1998, where Bill Clinton's approval rating in Gallup was 66% in October before the election. And the other one was 2002, when George W. Bush's approval rating was 61% just before the election. And I can tell you, having been in the White House that year, yes, we picked up seats in the House, broke the taboo, but it was really difficult, even with a 61% approval rating.
All right, Mr. Rove, I think, you're the political expert, I think President Trump is a historical one-off. I do not think his style, his manner of communication can be replicated. Can the coalition that he built be replicated? Or does that leave when he leaves office?
Well, think about what you used the right word, the coalition. In the 2024 presidential election, he was elected by two groups of people. One group of people that was basically 35, 36, 34, 37% of the total electorate said, we love Donald Trump. We love his every word, every gesture. We would walk over hot coals for the man. And they made up well over a third of the electorate and were the core of his victory. But he won by winning people to his standard who said, you know what, I got my concerns about him. I said, I don't like the tweeting. I think he ought to be nicer to people. But things were better when he was president, and I can't stand 4 more years of Biden-Harris. And that made up, 12, 13, 14% of the electorate. And combined, those two elements of the coalition gave him 49.8%. So that first group is going to be out there for him, I think. You can touch him when he's on the scene. They want to help him. But that second group is the group that he needs to focus on, and that means forward-looking, empathetic. A lot of what the speaker had to say about coming up with an agenda, and the agenda must be driven by people at the candidate level, candidates for the House and the Senate and governor, who are talking about what they believe in a way that makes it sound authentic and true. I mean, people can smell if you're going through the motions. People can tell if you're just saying what the consultant told you to say and not what's in your heart. And so candidate quality has a huge impact. The young guns, when Speaker McCarthy and Paul Ryan went out to recruit them, they looked for people who had convictions, even if sometimes they were 90% with the Republican agenda, but they had 10% of their own. That was fine, because what they were looking for was authenticity.
All right, I want to ask you about candidate selection. I don't know a soul in Texas who thinks Jasmine Crockett can win statewide in your beloved home state. But there were those who warned that Roy Moore could not win in Alabama, and yet he was nominated anyway. How do you factor in electability when primary voters are angry and frustrated? How do you balance those?
Yeah, well, this is the big threat for the Democrats. Now, look, I do think Jasmine Crockett is not going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. There's a lot of enthusiasm for another state representative named Tallarico, who's far more substantive. She's going to be the flavor of the moment because of her national reputation. But this is the problem Democrats have. The Democrats are going to leave a lot of races on the table if they nominate people who are on the far left of American politics, because that's not where the country is. Take a look at the New York election. Sure, Mamdani won, 50.4% of the vote. 66% of the voters in New York City are registered Democrats, and the guy couldn't win them. So he was too far left for a bunch of people who said, I'm a Democrat, I'd like to support the Democratic nominee, I live in a city that's dominated by Democrats, but I ain't voting for that guy. And that could be repeated not in deep blue places like the 5 boroughs of New York City, but across the country in districts that are far more purple, or even in some instances shaded slightly red, but winnable by the right Democrat.
Karl Rove, you are going to be a busy man in 2026 as your expertise and acumen are unparalleled. Happy New Year to you. I hope to see you soon, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and yours.
Yes, sir. Same to you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.